Few writers are comparable of the influence and achievement that Adrienne Rich garnered throughout her career. Rich is known not only as a writer, but also as an activist for feminism during the contemporary women's movement. Distinguished by an unwavering progressive vision, Rich was credited with bringing the oppression of women and lesbians to the forefront of poetic discourse. Adrienne Rich was born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1929. It seems as though she was never supposed to have turned out the way she did. Her father, an assimilated Jew, Arnold Rice, was a renowned pathologist who taught at the Johns Hopkins Medical School. Her mother, Helen Gravely Jones Rich, was a pianist and composer until, conforming to the social norms, married and cared for her three children. Rich's childhood was most influenced by her father's ambitions. Adrienne has said that she was groomed by her father to be a literary prodigy. He encouraged her to write her own poetry from a very early age. The poets such as Keats, Blake, and Donne, which she read within her father's library, sparked her interest in literature. Her desire for approval led her to conform her early writing to her father's standards. After graduating from high school, Rich attended Radcliffe College, which has now become a part of Harvard University. During her senior year at college in 1951, she won the prestigious Yale Series of Younger Poets Award for her first book, A Change of World. Seeming as though she had learned the lessons of her father well, the book was praised for its dutiful meter and command of form. In 1953, Rich married Alfred Haskell Conrad, a Harvard economist, with whom she bore 3 sons. Motherhood would forever change Adrienne. Many of her journal entries indicate that this was an especially difficult period for her. This can be seen in her writing, where she struggled with the concept of the prescribed role of womanhood. Rich would later say, "The experience of motherhood was eventually to radicalize me." This radicalization can be seen beginning to enter her writing in 1963 with the publication of Snapshots of a Daughter-in-Law. A turning point for her writing, Rich can be seen rebelling against her earlier strains of poetry's formalism and writing with a new, freer voice. Horrifying her critics, yet sealing her national reputation, Rich wrote the day-to-day truths of women's lives and explored the issues of identity and sexuality. In 1966, Rich and her family moved to New York City. It was here Adrienne became active in the civil rights, anti-war, and feminist movements. Her involvement in radical politics is reflected in many of her poems. Throughout the 60s and 70s, Rich experimented with various styles, including sentence fragmentation, irregular spacing, and jagged utterances. An angry exploration of the Vietnam War period, Rich won the National Book Award for diving into the wreck. Refusing to accept the award on her own behalf, she shared the prize with fellow feminist writer Alice Walker on behalf of all women. Earning countless other awards, including one MacArthur Genius Award, Rich made the headlines when she refused the National Medal of Arts for political reasons. Referencing Bill Clinton, she said, "The very meaning of art as I understand it is incompatible with the cynical politics of this administration." By 1970, Rich began to inwardly acknowledge her erotic love for women, and she and her husband had grown estranged. After his death, she came out publicly as a lesbian. She spent the rest of her life with her partner Michelle Cliff. In a time when it was still considered dangerous, Rich published 21 love poems which explored the sexual love between women. Rich dedicated herself increasingly to the feminist movement for the rest of her life. In a speech given in 1984, Rich summarizes her reason for writing in just 7 words, saying simply, "The creation of a society without domination." One of her poems, A Valediction Forbidding Mourning, expresses how the male-made language leaves women with no way of expressing themselves. Here it is. "My swirling wants, your frozen lips. The grammar turned and attacked me. Themes written under duress, emptiness of their notations. They gave me a drug that slowed the healing of wounds. I want you to see this before I leave. The experience of repetition as death, the failure of criticism to locate the pain, the poster in the bus that said, 'My bleeding is under control.' A red plant in a cemetery of plastic wreaths. A last attempt. The language is a dialect called metaphor. These images go unglossed. Hair, glacier, flashlight. When I think of a landscape, I am thinking of a time. When I talk of taking a trip, I mean forever. I could say, those mountains have a meaning, but further than that, I could not say. To do something very common in my own way." Let's start with the title. A Valediction Forbidding Mourning was originally the title of a John Donne poem, where a male speaker tells his beloved not to cry at his departure. In this poem, however, we are presented with a female speaker addressing other women. Thus, the illusion of the title immediately allows Rich to experiment with gender perspective themed poetry. The speaker begins the poem with a strong declaration. She immediately expresses that she has these wishes that are seemingly not being fulfilled. Her choice of diction here in swirling gives the reader an image of the waves of an ocean. Likewise, her many desires are surging, constantly in motion and unable to be pinned down. Juxtaposed with the swirling description of her desires, these lips are described as frozen. Clearly, whoever the you may be is a hindrance to the speaker's desires and is standing in her way of happiness. The word frozen shows that whatever is stopping the speaker from fulfilling her wants is an immutable and unchanging force. This starts the reader in a state of tension and conflict. The diction, such as grammar, themes, written, and notations, gives the reader a potential clue at what exactly is hindering the speaker. All pertaining to writing conventions, it seems as though language itself is a barrier the speaker faces. Perhaps she is suggesting that the male-dominated language does not leave her with room to truly express herself. This first stanza is dominated by fragmentation with lots of short phrases. It reads as if the speaker is not being very articulate. The style of fragmentation is able to show the failure of the speaker to adequately express her fears and anxieties. Perhaps this is because it's not even possible for her to be grammatical due to the masculinity of the language. The third stanza is the valediction of the poem. Speaking to other women, the speaker warns that complacency or repetition is as bad as death. Repetition here serves both to emphasize the complacency of the gender liberation movement that Rich was a part of, but also the repetition of literary themes. Rich is stressing that women can no longer comply with the old standards and write about themes under duress, as mentioned in the first stanza. In John Donne's poem, Donne forbids mourning because his lovers cannot be separated. However, in Rich's poem, hers are to make a clean break and be apart forever. Donne's emphasis is on continuance. Heightened by the contrast, Rich's poem highlights the need for freedom and the desire to break away. The very last line of the poem is the explosion of the speaker's desires to do something in her own way. This line presupposes the fact that she had always been denied her own interests, but now intends to do things as she desires. The only rhyme in the entire poem is found here, which adds to the conviction of this final statement. The tonal quality of this final note highlights the hopeful ending in the poem, in which women are encouraged to find personal validation.